Welcome back, occultists, to a new video. These stories may be triggering or graphic due to the subject matter. Do you like being home alone? What have you experienced whilst in your solitude? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments. If you are new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. In the quietude of our small town, Friday nights were our sanctuary, a time for me and Tom, my boyfriend, to unwind from the weariness of the week. Our home, a quaint two-story at the edge of town, was our haven, a place where the world's chaos couldn't reach us. Or so I thought. That night, as we settled into the comforting embrace of the living room, a strange noise shattered our tranquility. It was a thump, distant yet distinct, coming from upstairs. Tom and I exchanged a look, a wordless conversation and a glance. He kissed my forehead, a gesture of reassurance, and went to investigate. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching longer than the last. The house seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Anxiety gnawed at me, a growing unease that something was wrong. I called out, "Tom," but only silence answered. Compelled by worry, I ascended the stairs, each step creaking underfoot like a warning. The hallway was a tunnel of shadows, the familiar turned foreign. "Tom?" I called again, my voice a tremulous whisper in the dark. I found him in the bedroom, sprawled on the floor, unconscious. Panic surged, a cold tide. I knelt beside him, shaking his shoulders, begging him to wake up. But he was a dead weight, lost in a void I couldn't reach. The power chose that moment to die, plunging the house into darkness. My heart raced, a frantic drumbeat against the stillness. I fumbled for my phone, its screen a meager island of light in the engulfing black. I dialed 911, my fingers trembling, but the call wouldn't go through. The signal was dead, a mocking silence in place of a lifeline. Fear settled in, a tangible presence. I was alone, isolated, with an unconscious boyfriend and an unseen menace lurking in the shadows. In a moment of desperate clarity, I remembered the basement, a potential hiding place. I dragged Tom's limp body to the top of the stairs, but he was too heavy, an anchor pulling me down. Sobbing, I whispered an apology, a promise to return, and descended into the basement. The air was musty, thick with the scent of old memories and neglect. I hid behind boxes, my breath a ragged symphony of terror. I listened for footsteps, for any sign of the intruder. But there was only silence, a suffocating blanket of quiet. Time lost meaning in the darkness. My mind raced with scenarios, each more horrifying than the last. Then, a sound, footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming down the stairs. My heart leaped to my throat, every instinct screaming to run, to flee. But where? The windows were small, mere slits too tight to escape through. The footsteps grew closer, the intruder a looming specter in the dark. I braced myself, ready to fight, to scream, to do whatever it took to survive. The footsteps stopped, mere inches from my hiding place. I held my breath, praying to go unnoticed. A voice shattered the silence, a voice I knew all too well. "You can come out now, Sarah. It's over." It was Tom, his tone calm, almost amused. Confusion swirled within me, a maelstrom of disbelief and horror. "Tom? What's happening?" He chuckled, the sound a chilling caress against my skin. "It was all a test, Sarah. A game. To see how you'd react. To see if you were worthy." "Worthy? Worthy of what?" I stammered, my mind struggling to piece together the shattered fragments of reality. "Of me, of us. You see, I need someone strong, someone who can handle the darkness. And you, my dear, have proven yourself." I emerged from my hiding place, the pieces clicking into place, a horrific puzzle completed. Tom had staged everything, the noise, his unconsciousness, the power outage. It was all a twisted test, a game played with my life as a pawn. Anger flared within me, hot and righteous. "You're insane," I spat, my fear hardening into resolve. He moved closer, his eyes alight with a disturbing fervor. "No, Sarah. I'm enlightened. And now, You will be too. I backed away, my mind racing. I had to escape, had to get out of this nightmare. In a sudden move, I dashed for the stairs, but Tom was quicker. He grabbed me, his grip iron. "Let me go!" I screamed, struggling against his hold. He dragged me back into the basement, his strength overwhelming. "You can't leave, Sarah. You're mine now. You always have been." Desperation lent me strength. I kicked, bit, fought with every ounce of my being. In the scuffle, Tom stumbled, his grip loosening. Seizing the moment, I broke free and ran. I burst out of the house, the night air a cold shock against my skin. I didn't stop, didn't look back. I ran to the nearest neighbor's house, pounding on the door, my screams for help tearing through the night. The police arrived, their lights a beacon of hope in the darkness. They found Tom in the basement, a broken man muttering about tests and worthiness. The aftermath was a blur of questions and disbelief. How could the man I loved, the man I trusted, do this? The answers were a litany of horrors: Tom's descent into madness, his belief in a twisted ideology that glorified strength and darkness. I was left with scars, both physical and emotional. The experience shattered my trust, leaving me with a fear that lingered in the quiet moments, a shadow that whispered of betrayal. But I survived. I learned to trust my strength, to rebuild the shattered pieces of my life. Tom was a monster of my own heart's making, a lesson in the dangers of blind love. Sometimes, in the stillness of the night, I hear a noise, a faint echo of that terror-filled weekend. But then I remember, I survived. I escaped. And in that knowledge, there is a power, a defiance against the darkness that sought to claim me. The weekend promised freedom, a taste of adulthood for two 16-year-olds left to their own devices. I'm Lucy, and alongside my best friend Mia, we embraced the rare opportunity with the kind of enthusiasm only teenagers can muster. Our parents, off on a couple's retreat, left us with a list of emergency contacts, a fridge full of food, and the kind of trust that felt both exhilarating and daunting. The first night was a blissful dive into independence. We cooked dinner, albeit a haphazard attempt, watched movies, and shared secrets in the sanctity of the living room. The house, a two-story suburban home, felt larger, almost echoing with the absence of authority. As the night deepened, we settled into our makeshift bed in the living room, a nest of blankets and pillows. Our laughter dwindled to whispers, and soon, the steady rhythm of Mia's breathing signaled she had drifted to sleep. I lay awake a while longer, my mind a carousel of thoughts, until sleep finally claimed me. I awoke to a sound, a subtle, persistent scratching. Disoriented, I sat up, straining my ears against the silence. There it was again, a scraping sound, coming from the front door. "Mia," I whispered, nudging her awake. "Do you hear that?" Groggy and disoriented, she listened. The noise continued, a deliberate scratching, like metal against wood. Fear, sharp and sudden, gripped us. Someone was trying to break in. We crept to the window, peering out into the darkness. A shadow loomed at the front door, a figure obscured by the night. Panic surged through me. We were alone, vulnerable. "Call the police," I hissed, my voice barely a whisper. Mia fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking. But before she could dial, the sound ceased. We watched, holding our breath, as the figure retreated into the shadows, vanishing from sight. The police arrived minutes later, their presence a flood of relief. They found nothing amiss, attributing our panic to an overactive imagination fueled by a night of freedom. The next day was a blur of unease. We questioned if we had overreacted, our minds playing tricks in the shadow of solitude. But as night fell again, a sense of dread settled over us, a premonition we couldn't shake. We double-checked every lock, every window, assuring ourselves we were safe. But the house felt different that night, as if the walls themselves harbored a secret whisper. We tried to distract ourselves with movies, but our attention was fractured, our ears tuned to any stray noise. And then it came, the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. Frozen, we listened as footsteps echoed in the darkness, the sound of someone moving through the house with purpose. This was no figment of our imagination. Someone was inside. Panic propelled us into action. We bolted upstairs, locking ourselves in my parents' bedroom. The intruder was methodical, unhurried. We could hear him rummaging downstairs, the sound a discordant symphony of our worst fears. Mia dialed 911, her voice a trembling threat of terror. Someone's broken into our house. Please, hurry. The operator's comm was a lifeline in the chaos, a steady anchor as we huddled together, waiting for salvation. The footsteps grew closer, ascending the stairs with a deliberate slowness that felt like a taunt. Then they stopped, right outside the bedroom door. We held our breath, our hearts pounding a frantic rhythm. The doorknob rattled, a jarring sound in the suffocating silence. The door burst open, the intruder a dark silhouette framed by the hallway light. I couldn't see his face, only the intent in his stance, a predator poised to strike. In that moment, something primal took over. I hurled the bedside lamp at him, the sound of shattering glass piercing the night. He stumbled back, caught off guard. "Run!" I screamed. We raced past him, down the stairs, our only thought to escape. The front door was a beacon of hope, the night air a bitter cold that bit at our skin. We ran to the nearest neighbor's house, pounding on the door, our screams for help tearing through the quiet neighborhood. The police arrived, their sirens a wail in the night. The intruder was gone, vanished like a ghost. They scoured the house, finding the broken window, our belongings scattered, but no sign of him. The investigation revealed the chilling truth. The intruder had been watching us, his obsession a dark shadow that had hovered unseen. He knew our parents were away, knew we were alone. In the aftermath, our sense of security was shattered. The house, once a haven, now felt like a cage, its walls echoing with the memory of terror. Our parents, racked with guilt and fear, questioned their decision to leave us, their trust in us now laced with regret. Mia and I clung to each other in the following days, our bond a lifeline in the storm. We had faced our worst nightmare and survived, but the experience left its mark, a shadow that lingered in the corners of our minds. I learned that safety is an illusion, a fragile bubble that can burst at any moment. I became more cautious, more aware of the darkness that lurks in the unseen corners of the world. But I also discovered a strength I didn't know I had, a resilience forged in the crucible of fear. Mia and I, we were no longer just best friends. We were survivors, bound by an experience that transcended words. Sometimes, in the stillness of the night, I hear a noise, a faint echo of the past, and my heart skips a beat. But then I remember, I survived. We survived. And in that knowledge, there is a power, a defiance against the darkness that sought to consume us. My name is David, and I've always considered myself a rational man. I believe in what I can see, touch, and explain. That was until I moved into the old house at the end of Maple Street, where my skepticism met its match. The house was a bargain, a fixer-upper with a charm that spoke of forgotten elegance. It was in this solitude, this project of renewal, that my strange ordeal began. Every Tuesday and Friday, without fail, I would wake up at exactly 3:55 a.m. The consistency was unnerving, a precision that defied logical explanation. At first, I brushed it off as stress, the product of my overworked mind adjusting to the change in environment. But as the weeks turned into months, the occurrences became more peculiar, more unsettling. I would wake to a chill in the air, the room bathed in an eerie stillness that seemed to hum with anticipation. The shadows would appear denser, clinging to the corners with an almost tangible presence. I tried to rationalize it, to find a logical explanation, but none fit the unnerving precision of the phenomenon. It was during a conversation with Mrs. Langley, my elderly neighbor, that the first seed of dread was planted. "You do know what your property is built over, don't you?" she asked, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. I did not. She told me, in hushed tones, that before my house stood there, the land was part of an old cemetery, one that had been controversially relocated in the late 1800s. My rational mind rebelled against the implications, but the seed of fear had been sown. Driven by a need for answers, I delved into the local archives, unearthing the history buried beneath my home. The cemetery, it turned out, had been the resting place for the town's earliest settlers, their graves unceremoniously moved to make way for progress. But not all had been accounted for, a fact that sent a shiver down my spine. The following Tuesday, as the clock neared 3:55 a.m., I lay awake, a sense of impending dread filling the room. The air grew colder, the shadows deepened, and then I saw it, a figure, a mere wisp of darkness, standing at the foot of my bed. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was paralyzed, a prisoner in my own body. The figure was indistinct, a blur of shadow and despair, but its presence was overwhelming, a pressure that weighed on my soul. It moved, a slow, deliberate glide across the room. I could feel it, a coldness that seeped into my bones, a despair that threatened to drown me. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished, the room returning to normal as the clock ticked past 4 a.m. I was left shaken, my world upended. The following days were a blur of fear and obsession. I researched, I read, I sought the advice of paranormal experts. They spoke of spirits, of unrest, of energies tied to the land. It was a language foreign to my rational mind, yet I couldn't deny what I had seen. The next occurrence, I was prepared. I set up cameras, determined to capture proof, to validate my experience. As the clock neared 3:55 a.m., the familiar chill descended, the shadows coalesced, and the figure emerged. I watched through the lens of my camera, a detached observer to the supernatural. The figure was clearer now, a man, his features etched in sorrow. He seemed to be searching for something, his gaze forlorn, his movements a dance of despair. As he neared me, the camera flickered, the screen filled with static. When it cleared, he was gone, the room once again normal. The footage was corrupted, the images lost to the ether. Desperation took hold, a need to understand, to communicate. I reached out to a medium, a bridge between the worlds of the living and the dead. She came to the house, her presence a balm to my frayed nerves. As she walked through the rooms, she spoke of sadness, of souls tethered to the land, their rest disturbed. In my bedroom, she paused, her face pale. "He's here," she whispered. "The man you've seen. He's lost, searching for something he can never find." The medium held a séance, a ritual that felt like a crossing of a forbidden threshold. We sat, hands joined, as she called out to the spirit. The air grew thick, the shadows pulsed, and then he was there, the figure from my nightly hauntings. Through the medium, he spoke. His name was Jonathan, a settler who had died far from home. His grave was one of those lost, his rest disturbed by the living. He spoke of his search for peace, a peace he could not find in the upheaval of his eternal slumber. As he spoke, a sense of sorrow filled the room, a mourning for a life long gone and a rest eternally disturbed. The medium's voice trembled as she relayed his words, a conduit for his pain. And then, with a final whisper of despair, he was gone. The room lightened, the oppressive air lifting. The medium slumped, exhausted by the encounter. In the days that followed, I was haunted not by a ghost, but by a sense of guilt, a realization of the suffering upon which my home was built. I couldn't stay, knowing the pain that lay beneath the foundations. I moved out, leaving the house and its sorrowful history behind. But the experience stayed with me, a reminder of the unseen worlds that exist alongside our own. Jonathan's spirit, and those of the others disturbed, lingered in my thoughts, a haunting of the mind more than of the place. I learned that some truths are best left undisturbed, that the past has its own ghosts, ones that do not rest easily. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I wake at 3:55 a.m., a chill in the air, a shadow at the corner of my eye, and I wonder if Jonathan ever found his peace.